Pilgrimage for Brianhaw, a spiritual journey of relevance, from the ruins of Barking Abbey to Canterbury Cathedral, by Lee D. Miller. Day 3, Monday 27th of June 2011. I arose to the sound of birdsong and some intense heat in my tent. I was already sweating and I hadn't even walked anywhere yet. I unzipped the tent and took a look at the world. Beautiful, how exceptional was that? The view didn't have the mystique of the evening before because the light was different, but it did look so much more vibrant because of the brighter rays of light from the sun. I got my arse in gear and set to implement in stage 1 of my morning routine. Night clothes off, walking clothes on, burner on, water boiling, wash, brush teeth, prepare muesli, water boiled, burner off, Earl Grey made, lovely jubbly. I sat down to enjoy my cup of rosé and consumed my muesli while taking in the beautiful world around me. The sun was very hot, even at a time before 9 AM, and I actually began to feel quite uncomfortable in the heat. I made breakfast, a short one, and then started to implement stage 2 of my morning routine. Tent, condensation wiped dry, bedding packed, utensils washed and packed, toiletries packed, sundries packed, tent dried, tent dismantled and packed, litre bottle replenished with water, sun cream on, scan area for any missed litter, job done, ready to go. I took one last look at the view, as is my way, and then ambled down the side of the hill to rejoin the track that was the Darent Valley path. I carried on along the path and entered another field which was full of poppies at waist height throughout. The path went through the middle of them, and I continued to walk, and then stop, and then walk, and then stop throughout. One reason for this was so that I could take in the splendid scenery that surrounded me, and the other was that I had to get my plates of meat in gear. Okay, just to let you know, I'm now going to try and stop using the word feet. I've had enough of writing that 4-letter word, and it's time to stop hogging it's time for them to stop hogging the limelight. We'll see how I do. As they were a touch on the tender side and rebelling against being used that morning. That was that 4-letter word. I noticed ladies walking along behind me, and when they reached me, we said our hellos, and I then joined them on their walk for a short period. We spoke, and I discovered that they lived locally, but that they were not locals as they had moved into the area. They said that they loved living around these parts, and especially on days like today. They were out on their morning power walk, and they were walking a bit too fast for me. All I could do was plod, and I had no choice. We came to a bit of a viewpoint and stopped when I decided to ask about all the poppies in the field. To be honest, I firstly questioned whether or not I'd identified the flowers correctly, because I was confused and thought poppies were illegal to grow. I think it's the other kind of poppies. And the ladies went in to inform me that I was correct in my assertion. They were indeed poppies, and apparently they were all growing wild in the fields that the farmers had left fallow. I think I'm being watched. Got someone listening to me. It's good. That's how it's meant to be. Top drawer. Right, carry on. Blimey, I thought, how beautiful. The ladies pressed on and left me taking in the view by myself. It was gorgeous. I carried on at some point shortly afterwards, I can't remember exactly when or where for some reason, I entered a field which was one of golden barley. As I walked along, I happened to see a bumblebee fly across my path from right to left. How lovely, I thought. I then looked up and across the barley field, and in the distance I saw the bird fly from left to right. Something strange happened to me in that moment, and all of a sudden I felt light and a bit removed. I then went on to experience what I can only describe as an epiphany. After taking in what I'd just seen, I suddenly thought about the true nature of life itself and how wonderfully complex yet simple it is. I thought how beautiful it was that everything had a place, and that everything had found its place, and that this had all happened without anyone telling anything what to do. I thought that if you said to someone that you were going to organise life so that all people depended on each other and also lived in balance with each other, and that you wouldn't actually have to organise anything because all of this would just occur naturally and everything and every one of them would just find their place or fall into their place, then that someone would call you a nutter. They'd say impossible, something like that could never happen. You're mental, mate. You're some kind of fantasist and idealist. You could never do something like that. Things would have to be organised or the whole world would just fall apart. You need to invent a system so that everyone would know what they should be doing and when they should be doing it, or it will just be chaos and fighting. Well, in that moment I realised beyond a shadow of a doubt that it was possible for everyone to live in harmony with each other and without some kind of fascist control system dictating every aspect of their lives on the premise of creating security. And do you know why? Because it's already happened, and the impossible has been proved possible by the very thing that the human control system is systematically destroying: Mother Nature and the natural way of things. The natural world never craves security. It just takes each day as it comes and goes with the flow of life. And I had that realisation. And I had that realisation just after I saw a bird and a bee flying across a field in the Garden of England. I couldn't make that up, and if I did, you won't believe me. It reminded me of a conversation I'd had, which turned quite heated, just a couple of months before. I was sitting around a dining table with 4 people, all of which worked for the National Health Service. They were all good people and kind of heart. One was a doctor, one was a psychiatric nurse, and the remaining 2 both worked in NHS administration. We'd all had quite a number of glasses of wine, so you may forgive me if I cannot recall every word that was said with a degree of certainty, but the conversation concerned the amount of ridiculous diktats and bureaucracy the government imposed on them and how it prevented them from doing their jobs effectively. They all complained profusely about how, because of the ludicrous interference from the government, they were unable to give people the care that they felt was their duty to do and deliver it to the quality to which they desired. They understood the need for some centralised control, but were aghast about how far that control had reached. They shared numerous examples of their day-to-day experiences which illustrated the nonsense they were having to deal with in order to keep their funding and their employment, and duly commiserated with each other while seriously considering leaving the National Health Service altogether. Imagine that. Imagine that. 4 intelligent and quality people who the National Health Service and its users desperately needed, wanting to leave the profession they loved being a part of because of the heartless system. I didn't partake in the conversation, but just listened for a time of 20 minutes or so. I didn't say one word. I just observed, because this was the same conversation I'd heard people having in all walks of life, doing all kinds of jobs and in every sector all over the world, whereby the state had them by the proverbial bollocks, and was forcing them to do things that they felt were wrong. And quite frankly, I'd had enough of hearing it, so I piped up. So why don't you just stop participating with the nonsense, I asked. Why don't you just carry on doing your jobs, but stop doing anything they ask you to do that you feel and think is wrong? I was told that that was impossible and that the only thing to do was to change the system from the inside. I was then given a couple of examples of how they were attempting to bend certain rules in order to do that. I explained that the system hadn't been designed to be changed. It had been designed to wear you down into submission, and that's exactly what it was doing. And that whatever you participate in, you give your power to. So either stop participating with the nonsense you're complaining about, or stop complaining about it. Well, to be honest, that didn't go down too good, and a voice was raised at me, and rightly or wrongly, being from Barking, I didn't mind raising my voice back in response. I then had it explained to me that we needed the system, or there would be chaos. I couldn't believe it. The very people who had just spent about half an hour denigrating the system were now defending it. I explained that I believed if everyone stopped stepped out of the system, then there would indeed be chaos for a short period of time, but after that, everyone would find their place quite naturally, because that's just how the universe worked. I was then told that I didn't understand, that I was an anarchist, that I was naive, and that I was an idealist. Excuse me, I didn't understand. What, having a bubble bath? I was an anarchist? Me? An anarchist? Not a chance on your Nelly, mate. I was naive. Me? From the streets of Barking? They were really having a laugh. I was an idealist. Okay, point taken. I had no defence there. I justly defended myself against 3 of the accusations and then told them that I had managed to do exactly what I was preaching and that I had been living through my heart and as much as I could outside of the system for over 2 years. I explained it was possible to do if you helped others and allowed others to help you. But the thing that made it difficult was not necessarily the system itself, but the people who constantly complied with the system. And strangely enough, it was the people who complied with the system the most who were the very ones who also complained so bitterly about it. I was then informed that it was easy for me because I had nothing to lose, and that fucking pissed me off. I had nothing to lose. How dare they make such a dismissive presumption? Who were they to assume such a thing? I pointed out in a raised voice that I had in fact lost everything of my position and financial security because of the choices I had made, but I did not regret any of those choices because I had gained something even more precious and priceless. I had gained my freedom, or at least as much freedom that is possible, while everyone else chooses to participate in a system which systematically enslaves them and all those around them. I was then told to shut up or go. I chose to leave, and I didn't take any offence. To be honest, I'd gone a bit overboard with raising my voice, and I could have understand why they wanted me to shut up and go. It was fair play, and I have to admit, if I was them on the receiving end on me, then I would have probably told me to shut up and go as well. But I was also very glad that I said what I did. I had no regrets. I'd said the truth as I saw it, just a bit too loudly. But that's what passion can do to you, and it's something that had been on my chest for a while. We were all very civil to each other afterwards, and I bade everyone a good night. The ironic thing is, when you eventually find the courage to let go of all the things you believe you need in life in order to make yourself feel comfortable and secure, you discover a comfort and security surpassing anything you can possibly imagine. I honestly can't remember the exact point on my pilgrimage where all that happened and exactly when I had those thoughts. It's an absolute peculiarity to me. At every other point along my path, I can amazingly remember what I was thinking and the events that took place in terms of circumstances, environments, encounters and conversations, apart from this one. I'm pretty sure, to a probability of 85 to 90%, that this is where the moment took place. But if I was in a court of law, I couldn't swear to it beyond the shadow of a doubt. Although the event itself and the thoughts I had because of it are very clear, the environment and the circumstances leading up to and after it are quite hazy in my head. It's like I only remember the moment, and that moment was not connected to anything else. It's very strange, and also I find it quite weird. In the writing of this account, I was helped greatly in my recollections by the revisiting of my path in order to take the photos to accompany the account, and maybe this is the place where I should explain how exactly the idea for this book came about. On the day that the Occupy financial process began at St Paul's Cathedral in London, I had the feeling to go out and distribute copies of the first 4 pages of a chapter called The Debt Scam in a wonderfully well-researched book called And the Truth Shall Set You Free by David Icke. I'd photocopied and printed them off a few years before and had been handing them out at times when I felt it was right to do so ever since. The odd person had called me a nutter on the odd occasion when I have done so, but on the whole and most reassuringly, those who have accepted the copies off of me to read have been very grateful, with some even chasing me down the street after they had read the content to say thank you. And those are the most touching moments, by the way. and the ones that let you know that no matter what the ignorant people say, you are most definitely doing the right thing. On this day, I took a route of walking to hand out the copies from Tower Hill, across Tower Bridge to the South Embankment and all the way along the Thames to Westminster Bridge, stopping at Parliament Square before joining the protest at St Paul's Cathedral. While in Parliament Square, I took the opportunity to introduce myself to Barbara Tucker and say hello. After I'd completed my pilgrimage in July, I'd had a letter forwarded to the loved ones of Brian Haw, kindly by Linda of David Icke's support team, explaining what I did, just so that they knew that it had been done, and for no other reason. I didn't know if Barbara had received the letter, and so I just felt I should explain to her who I was and what I had done in Brian's remembrance. Again, it was only to let her know that someone had cared enough to do it. Barbara explained to me that she had received the letter and remembered thinking that it was such a lovely thing to do, but at the time, and understandably so, she had too much going on to reply. Babs then said that she was glad that she had now met me and asked if I had any pictures of the pilgrimage so she could put them onto Brian's website. I explained that I'd never travelled with a camera and so I didn't have any pictures, and she looked slightly disappointed. I then added that I had all the maps and that I could scan them and send them to her for the route, and that I could even write a short account to accompany them. She seemed quite enthusiastic about the idea, and so I made my promises to do so as soon as I could. We spoke briefly about other matters, and I said my farewells and continued to go on to join the protest outside of St Paul's Cathedral. In the days that followed, I had many thoughts about the promise I'd made to Babs, and was acutely aware that I could do much more than what I had agreed to do. I knew that the photos would play an important role in telling the pilgrimage account, and so I decided that I would do a pilgrimage revisited in order to take them. I had met many kind people during my pilgrimage, and so I also had the feeling that I would like to revisit some of them too. And so, at the beginning of January 2012, I set off on my pilgrimage revisited, and laughed at myself at the thought that it sounded like a programme made by Channel 4. I took photos of all the places that I felt were significant to my journey and to my thoughts on that journey, and the process added greatly to the depth of my memories, of the memories I recalled. It even added to them. I find that it was an exceptionally wise and positive thing to do, as during the process of retracing my steps, I recollected other things which had occurred during my pilgrimage that were significant, that had actually passed out of my short-term memory. After I returned, I went back to Parliament Square and spoke to Babs about it. I showed her the pictures that I'd taken and explained what I was thinking. The short account that I'd intended to write had now become something more substantial because there was so much more that I remembered. I explained that during the process of the revisiting, it had become very evident to me that the account, to accompany the pictures and the maps on Brian's website, had become an entity which could stand on its own. It had, in effect, become a book. The book that you are now reading, or I'm reading to you, and of which, and as I write, I am still not completely sure of its final destination. I'm gonna have a drink. Yeah. Oh, Canterbury. Wasn't it? That's where it ends up. What a muppet. I had momentarily forgotten. I hadn't spoilt the ending for you, have I? It's a good pulse fault that was. Now, where was I? I'd entered into Lullingstone Park and had lost track of the designated Darent Valley path. I could see where I was on the map in terms of the approximate field, but was beginning to get a bit frustrated because either the signage wasn't very clear for the Darent Valley path, or I had overlooked a signpost somewhere. I didn't want to go back and retrace my steps. I was in as little walking as possible mode, remember? And I also could see that the paths before me were not marked on my map. They must have been ones established by Lunnistone Park after the copy of the Ordnance Survey map was made, and so I didn't know exactly where they would come out. I trusted the old and ancient Anglo-Saxon wisdom of follow your nose, and took the path that appeared to be heading in the direction that I wanted to end up. Part of the way along, I saw a middle-aged gentleman out on a stroll, and so I took the opportunity to ask him for directions in order to reassure myself. "Excuse me, sir, does this path lead to Lunnistone Castle by any chance?" I inquired. "Oh, well, sort of. If you keep following it, you'll come to the path on the left. Don't take that one, but take the next, and I think that should bring you out near there," he explained. "Oh, thank you," I replied. I went to continue in that direction. "You're welcome," he finished by saying, while setting off to walk a different way. I followed the directions and somehow found myself on the edge of a golf course. I carried on in the direction I was heading and came to another junction of paths where I stood once again. Wasn't sure where to go. Just as I hesitated and stopped to consult my map, I saw the gentleman again as he came over the zenith of the mound a short distance away. I pointed to the path that I thought was the correct one as way of long distance questioning, and he held his thumb up by way of a long distance reply. The path did indeed lead to a lane that connected to Lunnistone Castle, and I was back on course again. I needed to refill my bottles with water, and I came across another couple of gentlemen who were standing by a van in the lane. I thought that they may be connected to the park in some way, so I asked them if there was anywhere to refill my bottles. They said to try the castle, but if not, then there was a National Trust place further along the path where I could probably do so. I thanked them and headed for the gatehouse of the castle. There were signs outside the building, and I noted that Lunnistone Castle was open to the public, though not today. It was quite an impressive sight with its fine red brickwork and elegant design. It was apparent to me that it was more of a country house than a proper castle, and it seemed to have the air of being open to the public in order to help fund its preservation about it. I noted that it was home to some kind of world garden, and that was its main feature. There was a chain across the entrance of the gatehouse, and I cheekily went under it so that I could see if there was anything in the courtyard for anyone in the courtyard for whom I could ask to gain some water. There was no one visible to me from the point of viewing outside. I peeked into the courtyard, going no further as I do not cross the threshold, as not to cross the threshold of the gatehouse, but still there was no one in sight. I did see to the right door a door to a public toilet, and I thought, fantastic, I should be able to fill up my water bottles in there somewhere. I decided to wait until I found someone to ask before I did so, and as it didn't feel right to go in without having permission, luckily for me, and within 5 minutes or so, a lady turned up and I politely asked her. She sounded quite well-to-do and explained that the castle wasn't open to the public at the moment, but she didn't mind me using the toilet facility. She let me know that was fine. At that point I heard some laughter and became aware of a group of people sitting on the roof terrace of the building of the main house and on the other side of the courtyard. The kind lady saw me looking up and volunteered, "Oh, that's Tom, I think, and some friends having breakfast." I remember thinking to myself how lovely it must have been eating breakfast up there on that beautiful sunny morning. And then I immediately counted the thought with the memory of my own breakfast, and to be honest, I knew exactly where I would rather have been on that, out of those two places, and given a chance, it was exactly where I had been, and in the picture that John Constable so sadly never got to paint. The lady left me to my own devices, and I was gutted to discover that the only taps in the toilet were on the hand basins. The angle in the sink was too tight for me to fill my water bottles. Bollocks, I thought. But then remembered the National Trust place that I'd been informed about further along. I left mildly disappointed, but with a sense of harmony because the lady had been so pleasant. I found my way back onto the path by the River Darent, and it was exceptional in its beauty. Once again, and much like the previous day, I find myself walking in the shade of the riverside trees with the added cooling effect of the river itself. The air was so clear, and the freshness of the leaves added to the sense of purity that I was experiencing. It was truly delightful, and I cherished every moment that I spent walking along that section of the river. I was so consumed in my appreciation for the landscape I was travelling through that I completely forgot about my quest to replenish my water supply, and it was only through another stroke of luck that I was reminded. As I approached the bridge crossing the river, I was completely focused on it, and it was only by chance that I happened to look back from whence I came. I suddenly saw the same gentleman who had already helped me to navigate my way through Lummerston Park on 2 occasions before appear on the path, and apparently from nowhere. He headed back along the river in the opposite direction, and I was intrigued to find out where he had just come from. I retraced my steps about 30 or so yards, and to the point where I'd seen him emerge, and lo and behold, it was the entrance to the Lummerston Park Visitor Centre. The gentleman had helped me for the 3rd time that day. I went in while counting my blessings and queued up in the cafe line to gain my essential refills. The visitor centre staff were very helpful and ever so pleased to assist. That was nice, I thought. Still up today. After that, it was onwards to Watford, and I was looking forward to joining the Pilgrim's Way proper. The countryside along this section of the Darent Valley path was very agreeable, although it did stray somewhat from the banks of the actual river itself. Although I felt like I was walking at a reasonably good pace, considering the heat and the state of my unmentionables, it did seem to take me quite a long time to complete, and my feet good timing were feeling the effects quite severely. An already exceptionally hot day was now up in its game, and it went into the unprecedented. It had once again become the hottest day of the year so far, and I couldn't believe that it was possible to get any hotter. I saw Watford from a distance as I approached it, and felt a sense of relief as I had set myself the target of arriving there before I allowed myself the privilege of a proper break. I was already very low on water again and would need a refill quite imminently. I crossed the last field before the buildings of the village began and entered a quaint little lane which was home to a row of cottages and to a traditional Kent oast. It was very picturesque, and I thought how well maintained it all looked. There were no front gardens to the cottages or as such, but instead the whole vicinity gave the impression of being one municipal garden. It had the feeling of a private area, but the public footpath was running directly through it. I saw that the path then rejoined the banks of the River Darent, and there was a very welcoming patch of grass beckoning me to sit upon it, while encouraging me to dip my former stars, who are now enjoying celebrity status, in the healing and cooling waters of the river. I had a feeling that if I did that, then the odds were that some resident would come out and complain about my existence, but my celebrities really needed a break and some well-deserved attention, and this place looked perfect. I unloaded my backpack, gathered my book and the remains of my water, and then I took my shoes and socks off my plates of meat. I then sat on the bank of the river, which was bricked and looked very civilised, and placed my feet into the cool abyss. Oh my God, I thought, and I can still remember the sensation so vividly now. It was bliss, absolute bliss. I couldn't even look at my book for a few minutes. So wonderful was the sensation. It made me tingle all over, and I felt so relaxed that I wanted to fall asleep. I lay back for a few minutes in the shade of the small tree, with flickers of light from the strong sun piercing through the tree canopy, warming me in places while allowing me the opportunity to feel predominantly cool. It was so good to get the weight off my back and off my, After an extended period of indulgent time, I gained the will to raise myself from my slumber and adopt a sitting position once more. My feet throbbed and tingled in the water, and I have to say it was once again a very pleasurable sensation. I really didn't want to leave this spot. I began to read my book and made the most of the moment. Honestly, it was... I still remember it now. Beautiful. Beautiful spot. After a while of sitting there and reading, a lady appeared in the garden on the opposing side of the riverbank. She was dressed in a swimsuit and lowered herself into the water by some steps built into the bank by her garden. The area of the river immediately in front of me was about 4 foot deep and formed a nice and steadily flowing pool. "Oh, hello," I interjected. "Hello," she replied, and then, "You do realise this is a private road?" To be honest, I did wonder, but didn't think I'd be doing any harm, I responded, with an apologetic tone. "Where have you come from?" she asked, while beginning to swim breaststroke against the light current. "From Luddiston today, but actually all the way from Barking in East London," I informed her. "Oh, you've come from that direction, have you? So you wouldn't have seen the signs," she said, half to me and half to herself. "No, I haven't seen any signs, but would you mind if I stayed for a short while? My feet really need it," I said, while lifting my feet out of the water to give her the benefit of seeing the sticky patches attached. "Yes, that's quite alright. Looking at you, you seem to be quite honest and trustworthy, and you don't give me the impression of being a troublemaker. You're not, are you, a troublemaker?" she asked in a kind of rhetorical question sort of way. "No, I don't tend to be," I replied, with a little bit of a laugh. "Why, do you get many troublemakers here then?" I inquired, by way of continuing the conversation. "Oh, just the odd local youngsters. They come down here to swim, and they never ask. We used to let them, but then it became too much, and some of them were behaving quite awfully. So we had to stop it. It wasn't all of them, of course, but ones that spoiled it didn't respect the fact that this was our space," she explained. I could understand what she was saying, and I sympathised. We went on to have a very pleasant conversation, generally about the weather, while she swam in the cool water, and I watched on in envy. I told her that I was doing a pilgrimage, although I didn't mention the reason, because for some reason I didn't have the impression that she would understand. And she then started telling me about the history of her house. It was formerly a watermill, and much of the mechanisms were still in place. As she was finishing her swim, her husband turned up and introduced himself, along with the family dog. Old bugger, I thought, and sure enough, it jumped in the water right next to me. Splash! All over me and my book again. They always do it to me. They must know. They just must know. "Oh, you little bastard," I thought, and not for the first time, I was aquatically assaulted by another person's four-legged friend. I have to